Let me say this clearly, because there is a lot of confusion around this topic. No contact does not work on men because it is a trick. It does not work because it creates fear. And it definitely does not work because men suddenly realize your value, like a movie scene. No contact works on men for one reason only. It changes the emotional dynamic. Most women misunderstand this. They think silence is about punishment, about proving a point, about making him miss you. But from a man's perspective, no contact does something much deeper and much more uncomfortable. It removes emotional pressure. And that is where everything begins. First, no contact works on men because it removes emotional pressure they didn't know how to escape from.
When a man pulls away, it's rarely because he wants to lose the connection. It's because something inside the connection started to feel heavy. Not dramatic, not toxic, just heavy. Expectations, emotional responsibility, the feeling that he needs to explain himself, reassure, clarify, or fix something emotionally. Most men don't know how to talk about that pressure, so they don't say, "I feel overwhelmed." They don't say, "I need space to process." They simply create distance. Now, here's where many women unknowingly make things worse. When he pulls away, you move closer. You ask questions. You want clarity. You want to talk. You want to understand. From your side, this feels loving and mature. From his side, it feels like the pressure just doubled. So when no contact happens, something unexpected occurs in his nervous system. For the first time, the pressure stops. No messages asking how he feels. No emotional check-ins. No tension to respond the right way.
And instead of feeling relieved and moving on, many men feel unsettled. Why? Because the silence removes distraction. Men do not process emotions the same way women do. Women often process through talking. Men process through space. When the noise stops, emotions surface. And what he pushed away emotionally now has room to come forward. This is when he starts to feel the absence, not just of you, but of the emotional role you played in his life. Your presence was regulating him more than you realized. Your attention, your warmth, your availability, all of it created emotional comfort. When it disappears, his system has to recalibrate on its own, and that's uncomfortable. This is why no contact often triggers reflection instead of relief. But here's the most important part, and this is where women regain power. No contact works best when it is not done to get a reaction.
The moment no contact becomes a strategy to control his behavior, it loses its strength. Men can feel manipulation instantly, but when no contact comes from self-respect, from a woman who stops chasing clarity and starts choosing herself, it creates a shift he cannot ignore. He doesn't feel punished. He feels the absence of emotional pressure and the absence of you. And that combination is powerful, not because it forces him to come back, but because it allows truth to surface. And truth is what determines everything that comes next.
Second, no contact works on men because silence resets a man's nervous system in a way conversation cannot. Most men live in a constant state of internal tension they rarely talk about. They carry responsibility, pressure, expectations from work, from life, from relationships. When emotional conversations stack on top of that, even healthy ones, his system can feel overloaded without him knowing why. When a relationship becomes emotionally intense and he doesn't feel fully grounded yet, his nervous system goes into avoidance mode. Distance becomes self-protection, not rejection. Now here's the part many women don't see. When you continue reaching out during that phase, checking in, asking how he feels, wanting to talk things through, his nervous system stays activated. He doesn't relax. He doesn't process. He stays in a state of quiet resistance. No contact changes this immediately. Silence removes stimulation. Silence removes emotional demand. Silence removes the need to respond. And in that stillness, his body finally calms down. But calm doesn't mean indifference. When his system relaxes, clarity returns. Thoughts slow, emotions rise, and what he was avoiding emotionally now has space to be felt. This is when memories surface, connection resurfaces, missing you resurfaces. This is why no contact often feels counterintuitive to women. You think silence means loss of connection, but for men, silence is often the doorway back to connection, with themselves first and then with you. There's another important shift that happens here. When you stop contact, you stop regulating his emotions for him. Your presence may have been stabilizing him more than you realized. Your attention may have been soothing him. Your consistency may have been holding emotional weight he never learned to carry alone. When that disappears, he is forced to self-regulate, and that's uncomfortable. Not because he can't live without you, but because he has to feel his own emotions instead of leaning on yours. This is when many men suddenly wake up, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, internal one. They start asking themselves questions they avoided before. They feel the gap you filled, and they begin to understand what the connection actually meant to them. But here is where I need to be very clear with you. No contact is not about waiting for him to come back. The power of no contact is not in his reaction, it's in your grounding. When you truly stop contact, you stop hovering emotionally. You stop living in anticipation. You return your energy to your own life, your own body, your own rhythm. And that changes everything. Because whether he returns or not, you are no longer stuck in emotional suspension. Silence doesn't chase men back. Silence reveals men. And revelation is always more valuable than reassurance. Third, no contact works on men because men process loss through distance, not through conversation. This is one of the biggest differences between how men and women experience emotional separation. When women feel loss, they often want to talk, understand, revisit memories, and emotionally process what happened. Talking helps women feel close again. For men, talking during emotional loss often does the opposite. Conversation keeps the emotional door open. Distance closes it. And that closure is what forces awareness. When a man still has access to you, even minimal access, his mind stays in maybe mode. Maybe this isn't really ending. Maybe things will go back to normal. Maybe I don't have to feel this fully yet. As long as communication exists, even casual communication, the emotional reality remains unfinished. No contact removes the illusion of continuity, and that's when loss becomes real. This doesn't mean he suddenly panics or feels dramatic pain. Men often experience loss in quieter, delayed ways. At first, he may feel relief, space, freedom. But then something unexpected happens. The emotional weight arrives later. Why later? Because men feel emotions once they are forced to sit still with them. Distance creates that stillness. In no contact, he no longer gets updates about your life. He no longer hears your voice. He no longer receives emotional cues that keep him regulated. And without those cues, his mind begins to review what the connection actually gave him. This is when he starts to feel absence, not in a desperate way, but in a reflective one. He notices the emotional comfort that is gone. He notices the presence that used to ground him. He notices the silence where warmth used to live. And here's something very important for you to understand. Men don't miss what they didn't value. They miss what they felt safe inside. No contact doesn't create feelings out of nothing. It reveals feelings that were postponed. This is why explaining, convincing, or emotionally processing with a man who is pulling away rarely works. It keeps him in his head. It keeps him defensive. It keeps him from feeling. Silence, on the other hand, moves him into emotional reality. But again, and this matters deeply, no contact is not about waiting in pain. Emotionally mature women don't go into no contact to trigger longing. They go into no contact to reclaim themselves, to stop chasing emotional answers from someone who isn't ready to give them. And paradoxically, that self-respect is what allows a man to finally feel what he avoided. Because when you disappear emotionally, the connection is no longer something he can manage or control. It becomes something he has to feel. And feeling is where truth lives. Some men feel that truth and step forward with clarity. Some men feel it and realize they are not ready. Both outcomes are gifts, because no contact doesn't just show you who he misses, it shows you who he is. Fourth, no contact works on men because it restores polarity and attraction, not through absence alone, but through energetic balance. Attraction doesn't live in constant closeness. It lives in movement, in space, in the natural rhythm of approach and retreat. When that rhythm breaks, when one person pursues and the other resists, attraction weakens. This often happens right before no contact begins. A man pulls away. A woman leans in emotionally. The dynamic tilts. At that point, even if love exists, polarity is lost. The connection becomes tense instead of magnetic. No contact corrects this without confrontation. When you stop reaching out, stop checking in, stop emotionally tracking him, the imbalance disappears. There is no longer a pursuer and a retreating partner. There are simply two individuals standing in their own space, and polarity begins to rebuild. From his side, something subtle shifts. He no longer feels pursued, he no longer feels cornered. He feels space, and space invites movement. It allows desire to rise naturally instead of being forced. This is why attraction often returns during no contact. Not because you vanished, but because you stopped pushing against his resistance. Attraction cannot exist under pressure. And here's the part many women misunderstand. No contact doesn't make you passive. It makes you still. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is strength. A woman who can remain emotionally grounded in silence communicates something powerful without saying a word. I am not chasing. I am not panicking. I trust myself. That energy is deeply attractive. Men are drawn to women who are anchored in themselves, not because those women are unavailable, but because they are not desperate for validation. When polarity returns, a man often feels the urge to move forward again. Not out of fear of loss, but out of renewed desire. But here is the truth that protects you. If polarity returns and he still doesn't move toward you, then the attraction was never strong enough to sustain a relationship. And no amount of communication would have fixed that. No contact saves you from false hope. It reveals whether desire exists without pressure. This is why emotionally mature women don't use no contact as a tactic to win someone back. They use it as a reset for themselves first and for the dynamic second. And in that reset, truth becomes unavoidable. Fifth, no contact works on men because it interrupts emotional dependency on both sides. This is uncomfortable to hear, but important to understand. In many connections, especially intense ones, emotional dependency slowly forms without either person realizing it. One person becomes the emotional regulator, the other becomes emotionally reliant. Often, women take on the role of emotional stabilizer. You listen, you soothe, you adapt, you provide reassurance, you create emotional safety. And while this feels like love, it can quietly turn into emotional labor. When a man becomes accustomed to that emotional support, he may not fully value it, not because he doesn't care, but because it's always there. He leans on it without noticing its weight. No contact removes that emotional crutch. Suddenly, he has to regulate himself, sit with his own thoughts, manage his own emotions, face his own uncertainty, and that can feel destabilizing. This is why some men react strongly to no contact, not because they are obsessed, but because the emotional structure they relied on is gone. At the same time, no contact also interrupts your dependency. When communication stops, you are no longer feeding your nervous system through his responses. You are no longer checking for validation. You are no longer emotionally hovering. You are forced to return to yourself. And that is where real empowerment begins. Because dependency, even mutual dependency, is not intimacy. Intimacy exists when two whole people choose each other, not when they need each other to feel stable. No contact clears the emotional fog. It reveals whether the connection was based on mutual desire or emotional reliance. If a man reaches out during no contact, it often means he is feeling the absence of regulation. But here is where wisdom matters. The goal is not to rush back into the same dynamic. If contact resumes without boundaries, the cycle repeats. Emotionally mature women understand this. They don't re-enter from fear. They re-enter from clarity. They assess whether the man has developed more emotional responsibility, not just more emotional hunger. And if he doesn't reach out, then no contact has done something even more important. It has freed you. It has removed the emotional loop that kept you invested in uncertainty. It has returned your energy to yourself. It has restored your emotional independence. And emotional independence is not loneliness, it is power. Because when you no longer need a man to stabilize your emotions, you can choose him freely or walk away freely. And that freedom is what no contact is really about. Sixth, no contact works on men because it forces them to face their own emotions instead of avoiding them. Many men don't lack emotions, they lack the habit of sitting with them. When things get uncomfortable inside, men often distract themselves. Work, friends, gym, entertainment, even new connections. Anything that keeps them from slowing down long enough to feel what's actually happening. When you're still present in his life, even minimally, he has an emotional outlet, a buffer, a soft landing. He can avoid fully processing what he feels because part of the connection is still alive. No contact removes that escape. Silence creates emotional exposure, and exposure is uncomfortable. At first, he may try to distract himself even more. He may stay busy. He may appear unaffected. But internally, something shifts. Without emotional access to you, there is no shortcut around his feelings. They surface on their own time. This is when reflection begins. He starts replaying moments, conversations, energy, how he felt around you, how you made him feel about himself, and most importantly, how he feels now without you. This is not romantic thinking at first. It's emotional accounting. Men ask themselves quietly, why do I feel this absence? What did she give me emotionally? What did I take for granted? These questions don't arise when communication continues. They only arise when reality sets in. Here's something very important for you to understand. No contact doesn't make a man value you. It reveals whether he already did. If there was emotional depth, he feels the loss clearly. If there wasn't, the silence confirms that too. Either way, truth surfaces. This is why no contact is emotionally clean. It removes confusion. It removes mixed signals. It removes false hope. And while he is facing his emotions, something equally important is happening on your side. You are learning to tolerate silence. You are learning that your worth doesn't collapse without communication, that your emotional stability doesn't depend on his responses, that you can feel discomfort without reacting impulsively. That is emotional strength. And emotionally strong women don't need to force outcomes. They allow them. If a man returns after facing his emotions, he returns with clarity, not confusion. He comes back because he chose to, not because he was persuaded. If he doesn't return, you haven't lost anything real. You've gained certainty. No contact is not about control. It's about confrontation with reality, with truth, with self. And that confrontation is what moves both people forward. Seventh, no contact works on men because it removes the emotional safety net, and that reveals desire. Many men stay emotionally undecided longer than women realize, not because they are cruel, but because as long as emotional comfort exists, there is no urgency to choose. When a woman remains available, understanding, and emotionally present, despite uncertainty, a man can linger in a gray zone. He gets connection without commitment, comfort without clarity, presence without responsibility. And as long as that safety net exists, desire doesn't need to evolve into decision. No contact removes that net. Suddenly there is no emotional cushioning, no reassurance, no familiarity to fall back on. And this is when a man is forced to answer a question he may have avoided. Do I actually want this woman, or was I just comfortable with her presence? This is not a conscious test. It's an emotional reckoning. Men don't truly know how much they want something until they feel what life is like without it. As long as you are emotionally accessible, he doesn't have to confront that truth. Silence makes it unavoidable. Here's where many women misunderstand the purpose of no contact. They think it's meant to make a man miss them. But missing is not the goal. Choosing is. A man can miss you and still not step forward. But when no contact removes comfort, the only thing that brings him back is desire, not habit, not guilt, not convenience. And desire only survives when it's real. If he reaches out during no contact, it's often because the absence exposed something he didn't expect to feel. The loss of warmth, the loss of emotional safety, the loss of how he felt about himself around you. But wisdom matters here. Emotionally mature women don't rush to restore the old dynamic the moment he reaches out. They don't collapse back into availability. They stay grounded. They let his actions show whether desire has turned into intention. Because a man who truly wants you doesn't just return, he adjusts. And if he doesn't reach out at all, then no contact has given you clarity you couldn't have reached through conversation. It has shown you that comfort existed, but desire did not. And that truth, while painful, is liberating. Because you stop negotiating your worth. You stop waiting for potential. You stop hoping effort will create desire. No contact doesn't create attraction out of thin air. It filters. It filters confusion from clarity, comfort from commitment, attachment from desire. And women who allow that filtering don't lose men. They lose illusions. And that is a powerful gain. Eighth, no contact works on men because it exposes the difference between emotional attachment and emotional readiness. Many men feel attached long before they are ready to lead, commit, or show up consistently. Attachment feels good, it's warm, it's comforting, but readiness is different. Readiness requires responsibility, emotional presence, and follow-through. When contact continues during uncertainty, attachment can survive without readiness. A man can stay emotionally connected while avoiding decision. He can enjoy the bond without stepping into his role. No contact breaks that illusion. When you step away, attachment alone is no longer enough. If a man is emotionally ready, the silence activates him. He feels the gap and moves toward it with intention. He doesn't just miss you, he acts. If he isn't ready, the silence reveals that too. He may feel something, but he doesn't move. And that distinction is critical. This is why no contact is so confronting for men. It removes the middle ground. There is no emotional halfway point anymore. Either he steps forward or the connection dissolves. And many men don't realize how much they relied on that middle ground until it disappears. From your side, this can feel scary. Silence feels like loss. But emotionally mature women understand something important. Clarity is safer than uncertainty. No contact doesn't rush outcomes. It clarifies them. It tells you whether the man in front of you is capable of meeting you, not just liking you. And here's where empowerment deepens. When you remain in no contact, you are no longer trying to inspire readiness in someone else. You are honoring your own timeline, your own standards, your own emotional needs. You stop hoping he will become ready. You start observing whether he already is, and that shift changes everything. A man who is ready doesn't need to be chased, coached, or convinced. He may take time, but he doesn't disappear indefinitely. He returns with direction. A man who isn't ready may feel loss, but he won't transform for it. And that is not your failure. No contact doesn't fail when a man doesn't come back. It succeeds by revealing whether staying would have cost you your peace. Emotionally strong women don't measure success by reunion. They measure it by self-alignment. And self-alignment always attracts the right outcome, whether that is a man stepping forward or a door closing cleanly. Ninth, no contact works on men because it stops emotional chasing. And chasing is the fastest way to destroy desire. I want to say this gently, because many women chase without realizing they're doing it. Emotional chasing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Checking in just to see how he's doing. Sending something you know will remind him of you. Asking for clarity one more time. Hoping this conversation will finally fix everything. From your side, it feels reasonable. From his side, it feels like pressure. When a man pulls away, his system is already in retreat mode. Any movement toward him during that time increases resistance. The more you try to close the distance, the more he feels the need to protect his space. No contact stops this pattern immediately. Silence removes pursuit. Silence removes urgency. Silence removes emotional negotiation. And something important happens when chasing ends. Desire has room to breathe. Desire cannot exist where pressure lives. It only grows where choice exists. When you stop chasing, you are no longer asking him to choose you. You are allowing him to choose, or not, freely. And free choice is the only choice that has meaning. This is why no contact often changes a man's behavior more than any conversation ever could. Not because he is manipulated, but because he is no longer pushed. But here's the deeper empowerment for you. When you stop chasing, you also stop abandoning yourself. Chasing is exhausting. It keeps you in a state of emotional alertness. You wait, you analyze, you hope, you overthink, and your life slowly shrinks around one question. Will he come back? No contact breaks that loop. You redirect your energy back to your body, your life, your rhythm. You stop feeding anxiety. You stop living in reaction. You start living forward again. And this internal shift is felt. Men are highly sensitive to emotional energy. When a woman stops chasing and becomes grounded, something registers. He feels the absence of pressure and the presence of strength. If he still wants you, he will move toward that strength. If he doesn't, the silence protects you from continuing to pour energy into uncertainty. Either way, you win. No contact is not coldness. It is self-respect in motion. And self-respect is far more attractive than reassurance ever could be. 10th, no contact works on men because, in the end, it is not about controlling him. It is about returning you to yourself. Most women enter no contact hoping for one thing, that he will realize, come back, and finally choose them. And while that sometimes happens, that is not the real transformation. The real shift happens inside you. When contact stops, something uncomfortable but powerful occurs. You are no longer reacting to his behavior. You are no longer adjusting your emotions around his availability. You are no longer waiting for signals to decide how you feel about yourself. You come back to center. This is where many women underestimate what no contact truly does. It forces you to face silence, and silence reveals truth. Not just about him, but about how much of your energy was tied to being chosen. When you stop reaching out, you stop outsourcing your emotional stability. You begin to rebuild it internally. And as that happens, your standards change. Your tolerance for confusion lowers. Your need for reassurance fades. You stop asking, "Why isn't he choosing me?" and start asking, "Is this dynamic choosing me?" That shift is everything. From a man's perspective, this is often the moment he feels the real loss. Not because you disappeared, but because your energy is no longer available for free. He no longer feels like the emotional center of your world, and that forces him to confront a truth. He must either step forward intentionally or step aside completely. There is no longer a place to linger. And if he doesn't step forward, then no contact has done its job. Because the purpose of no contact is not to save a connection that costs you your peace. It is to protect your dignity while allowing truth to rise. A man who is aligned with you will not punish you with silence. He may need space, but he returns with clarity. He doesn't leave you guessing. He doesn't keep you emotionally suspended. And a man who cannot do that is not someone you need to convince. He is someone you need to outgrow. No contact accelerates that process. It shortens suffering. It sharpens clarity. It restores self-respect. And that is why it works, regardless of the outcome. If there is one thing I want you to understand, it's this. No contact is not a tactic to make a man miss you. It is a boundary that makes you visible to yourself again. It is the moment you stop asking for emotional crumbs and start standing in your worth. It is the moment you stop chasing clarity from someone else and start creating it within. Some men will feel that shift and rise to meet you. Others will fade, and that is not a loss. The real loss is staying where you are not chosen clearly. When you choose yourself, the right outcome always follows. Sometimes that outcome is a man stepping forward. Sometimes it's peace walking in. Both are victories. And once you understand that, no contact is no longer scary. It becomes freedom.